My name is Average Joe, and I'm a proud geek with expertise in movies, superheroes, and animation.
My name is Beef Pork Ribs. I'm a fine repository of esoteric knowledge, which I suppose most people would qualify as geeky. Though I dabble in many fandoms, my main areas of expertise are anime, movies, and Belgian comics, with a strong recent insurgency of D&D.
Our mission is to bring nerd and geek culture to the masses
by sticking it all under the microscope.
Welcome to the Bat Jar Podcast.
Movies, comics, graphic novels, TV, cartoons, animation, nerds are geeks, entertainment culture. Hear it on the Bat Jar, Nerdy Power. Nerds and geeks, come gather around the scene. Come and join us in the Bat Jar. Come and tune into Average Joe and his team. Lots of room here in the Bat Jar. When the newest nerdy news drops, these podcast pals put it under the scope. DC, Marvel, Disney, Star Wars, cinematic multiverses. Bat Jar, Nerdy Power.
Hello there, and welcome to the Bat Jar Podcast, where we put nerd and geek culture under the microscope.
And then if we don't like it, we put it under the microscope again.
So, did you end up watching Raya and the Last Dragon last week? I've been thinking about this all week.
Oh, yes, we did actually end up watching it after the episode, and yeah, it lived up to expectations.
Hooray!
Yeah, it's
What
not
kind of
a
bat
lot
cookie
of
would you
movies that
give
can
it?
do that. Oh, what kind of bat cookie? I think I'd give Raya a solid 3.5.
I was listening back to old episodes. I know Mjolnir commented that she saw from the trailers it looked like Sisu was really pretty as a dragon. Did she end up enjoying that character?
Oh, yes. My wife is in love with a fictional dragon, and I just have to deal with that. So that was pretty much her immediate reaction after the movie is, oh my gosh, Sisu is so pretty. So yeah, that's she definitely has not changed her mind on that point.
All I have to say, we do have some Dooms delays this week.
Hey, Dooms delays.
We didn't include this in our Films of 2021 video, but our video. We don't do video. Well, technically, if you listen to our podcast on YouTube, it's a video, but. Anyway, we did mention In the Heights, which is a film adaptation of a musical.
Oh, yes.
I've never heard of this musical before, but your reaction there tells me you have at least heard of it.
Well, you must remember that my wife is a huge Lin-Manuel Miranda fangirl. And therefore, yes, I have heard about it. And I did know it was being made into a movie.
Okay,
unless I'm mistaking it for something else. It is the one that Lin-Manuel Miranda wrote, right?
I'm not sure, but I'm actually looking at the information here. It's not really a delay. It went from having a limited release on June 18th to now having a wide theatrical release on June 11th. So actually, it's an opposite of a delay. It's like it comes out a week sooner now.
Oh, there you go. So a Doom's change, I guess. And also, Mjolnir has just confirmed it is the one written by Lin-Manuel Miranda, in which he is, like Hamilton, the main character.
His name is Usnavi.
So nice of him to give himself leading parts.
Really
yeah, I mean, it gives other people the opportunity to bow down to his superior prowess. I don't know.
There is one actual Doom's delay. Venom, Let There Be Carnage, the second in the Venom franchise, is been delayed. It was coming out in June. It's now coming out on September 17th, 2021.
They're probably cast. I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting to really though. I felt like Venom would be one that they just push forward, A, because it's Venom, and B, because like people seem to like the first one, so why not, like, why mess with a good thing that they seem to have going? But
yeah, this sort of suggests that there's like people are worried. They're kind of running away from the summer, thinking like, oh, like we won't be able to make enough money. There won't be enough movie theaters open, and
right,
they might just be
like the whole we need to actually make summer blockbusters a thing again, because otherwise we're gonna have a problem.
It'll be interesting to see what happens in the next couple of weeks if more and more studios are pushing their release dates out of the summer slots, because we had like a case before where movies were actually pushing their releases up sooner. I kind of just want this movie to be done with. But I get it. Sony.
You don't believe in a Venom movie?
We've talked
No,
about
I know. We have talked about it, and you have no great love for that specific brand of not Spider-Man movies. And I do agree that you're right. Venom without Spider-Man isn't really.
I mean, it's a thing. Like, there's comics where Venom is the star, and even Carnage is the star without Spider-Man involved. So I know it's possible. That's just not my preference.
Yeah. Well, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should.
Hey, that's as good a transition as any. Today we are talking about Zack Snyder's Justice League, or
AKA just because you doesn't mean you should.
Otherwise known as the Snyder Cut. Now, we have talked about this idea a couple times. I think we talked about when it was first announced, and we talked about it in Movies of 2021. So we've already kind of spoken a bit about this idea that the Justice League movie that came out in 2017 is getting a new version that's now available. But Beef Pork Ribs, you were not part of our conversation about this movie when it first came out in 2017. So tell us, like, what were your thoughts of the theatrical release of Justice League?
Other than the fact that I don't fully remember it, which might be quite telling, I'm not sure. It felt very much like, sadly, the rest of the DC movies at this point. Yeah, it felt rushed, actually, I think is the best way. And I know that if you look at the history, and part of the reason why they're doing the Snyder Cut is because it was, but it definitely felt rushed. And not just in the production value and the story, and let's be honest, some of the visual effects, but also just in, it did feel like it was just trying to push something that hadn't been set up, and like it weirdly was trying to have its cake and eat it too, do universe building at the same time as it already has a fully formed universe in action, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
And that just seemed a little, a little off.
Yeah, I went back and listened to our episode where we reviewed the Justice League movie. It was Asian John, Ben the movie buff was there, and so was I. And I was very apologetic towards the movie. We in the episode we kind of talked a lot about the issues that led to, in it, that were involved with this production, and I think because I was aware of those things, I was more forgiving of the final product. And as like a DC fan, I just really wanted to like the movie. So I
all know you just want DC to be okay, and you want to hug them and make them feel loved.
Yeah, because I think overall DC and Marvel are like Coke and Pepsi. Like, they're both quality products, and the different, like, there's people who like one or the other. There's people who like both. So that's what I want to have happen in the movies. I want people to like see that DC and Marvel movies can be of equal quality, and that doesn't have to be like this one is objectively better than the other. I actually I gave the movie a 3.5 out of 4-pack cookies because I was so...
Wow, that's very forgiving.
Well, and at that point I was like, it's not the movie's fault that it's like this. It's like the movie, I was like thinking the movie as if it was a person, because I'm like, so much of why this movie sucks is because of all these things that happened behind the scenes and things that the studio was doing. And there was enough there for me. Like, I noted that I really enjoyed the way they kind of like brought Batman's character around in Justice League. And I was like, I actually swore, I had to like censor myself. I swore at Rotten Tomatoes because I was so mad at them because like Rotten Tomatoes, just the way that the review, it just did not look favorably on Justice League. And I was like sad that the movie had done so poorly financially. Like, in my mind, I was like, a movie starring all the members of the Justice League should not be underperforming like this.
But it did.
But it did. And you know what? Like, Asian John and Ben Movie Buff, both working more in the film industry, they really noticed a lot of the technical issues of the movie that I think stem from the fact that so many reshoots were done and so many scenes were reshot, that as a more casual movie person, I wasn't really paying attention to. So it was very interesting preparing to watch Zack Snyder's Justice League to remind myself, like, what was my thought at the time? I think in the, almost 4 years since then, I have kind of like cooled my jets on the original Justice League.
Come to accept it for the mess that it truly is.
Yeah, like, I can still sit down and enjoy it and like just sort of ignore the things that don't work and the things that are hard to look at. But I was never one to like, I was never on the Snyder Cut bandwagon. Like I was on social media and I would see people tweeting about it, hashtag release the Snyder Cut. And while I was like, yeah, like it would be nice to like give the guy a chance to make put out the movie that he wanted to make, I didn't feel passionate enough to like tweet with the hashtag myself or to, campaign for it or sign any of the petitions. And I think if I recall, you were even like were you even aware of the campaign?
I was aware of it. I just didn't think it was a good idea. Yeah, no, I was never. I was vaguely aware of its existence. I don't think I knew exactly what the Snyder Cut was until we started talking about it on the podcast, though. So, yes and no, I guess.
Well, I started looking into it this week because I wasn't really aware of like how long I mean, it was only like 2 months after the movie came out in theaters that people started.
That's how early it started?
Oh yeah, like pretty much
I was not
away.
aware of that.
I mean, at that point, it was mostly just people using the hashtag on Twitter, I think. But it got to the point where like they paid for a plane to fly over Comic-Con International with a banner saying "Release the Snyder Cut." I don't know how they did it, but they fundraised enough money to get a billboard in Times Square campaigning for them to release the Snyder Cut.
That's some dedication to a cause, which I guess does ever so slightly justify what the studio did in releasing it. But because I guess it was truly what the fans were demanding. But as to whether that was a good idea is still...
Well, we talked about this with the Sonic thing, where like this is the time when fans can kind of control what we get.
Yes, but there's a difference between making visual changes to the main character who looks horrible and...
I mean, Superman was one of the main characters and he looked horrible in the theatrical
That's true.
cut.
But there is a certain... Like, I know that theoretically... The Snyder Cut in the kind of original what they were asking for, with release the Snyder Cut, wasn't necessarily what we got. Because what we got was the Snyder Cut with a lot of time to look at it and to perhaps, change the things that already were not very popular. So... and that's not Zack Snyder's fault by any, stretch of the imagination. It's what he was given and what happened eventually. But I don't know. It makes it a little more hard to swallow knowing what has happened. And that it isn't just like, oh yeah, it was the Snyder Cut exactly as he meant it. It is essentially a different movie.
Well, he only filmed and they only shot about 6 minutes of brand new footage. Like most of what we see, unless it's a scene that's all CG, most of it was like what was originally filmed and there was just a re-edit of the original movie.
Yes, but at the same time, they still have the benefit of hindsight.
Yeah, and we'll talk about how much that actually plays into it here. But before we dive any further, I think, trying to describe the Blu-ray case description of this, the plot is generally the same as it was before. But would you care to just, for those perhaps who haven't seen the original Justice League movie, give us the Blu-ray case description of what is now Zack Snyder's Justice League?
I have turned worlds to dust. All of existence shall be mine.
Second chance. I am not gonna waste it.
He said the age of heroes would never come again.
We're fighting the devil and his army. I don't care how many demons he's fought and how many hells. He's never fought us united.
You hated Batman v Superman. You were disappointed by the Suicide Squad.
No. Suicide Squad. Remember, because
sorry,
Suicide
right?
Squad's
Yes,
a different movie
so
now.
you hated Batman v Superman. You were disappointed by Suicide Squad. You cringed at Bird of Prey, and you begrudgingly accepted Aquaman. Now get ready for the reboot that comes later, but started it all off with Justice League. Now that Superman is, spoilers, dead, we are trying to assemble, or Batman is trying to assemble a team to get ready for the next great problem, which happens to be already happening. What a coincidence. He more or less manages to get them together to fight against Steppenwolf, who, other than being called after a band born to be wild, has vague evil plots to use evil boxes to teleport an army and destroy the world. But really, he's only working for Darkseid, and there's, the anti-life equation, and Cyborg is in there, and it all kind of fits together, more or less.
There we go. So, from memory, Beef Pork Ribs, what do you remember of why the Snyder Cut is a thing? Do you remember what the situation was?
I mean, why he had to leave the movie?
Yeah, do you recall what had happened there?
Yes, it was his daughter committing suicide, I believe.
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah, and it was, which is a very reasonable reason to drop a project and let no one say otherwise. Obviously, but and then Joss Whedon took over, as I recall, as well.
That's right. So Joss Whedon, who in recent years has kind of come under fire for different things. He was a very well-regarded person for many years, having created Buffy and Firefly, and he directed the first 2 Avengers movies, which were received fairly well,
as well as the old X-Men movies.
Joss Whedon, I think he might have written one of them, but I don't think.
He wrote the first one.
He wrote some X-Men comics too, actually, for a while.
Because he's responsible for that most beloved of all lines from the X-Men franchise. Right. You know what happens to a frog when it gets struck by lightning?
Well, it's Toad.
A toad, yes.
But anyway, at the time, so when Zack Snyder stepped away, he and his wife Deborah, who was producing the movie, they stepped away in February 2017. So that's, 6 or 8 months before the movie was supposed to be released in theaters. And there's rumors that at the time, Warner Brothers and the other producers of the movie were not pleased with what Zack had completed. They had finished principal photography. They'd finished filming all the scenes with the actors. And he stepped away, and the official announcement was that Joss Whedon was coming in to oversee the completion of the movie. At the time, Joss Whedon was working on developing a Batgirl movie, so he was already kind of working at Warner Brothers, and they obviously had him stop working on that to come in and work on Justice League. So we were told at the time he's just overseeing the completion of the movie, so he's helping edit the movie and kind of get the final cut out. But very quickly after he was announced as being involved, it was announced they were going to do reshoots. And as we've said here before, reshoots do not necessarily mean a movie is going to end up bad. But whether it was his own desire to make it more like his movies or Warner Brothers telling him, make it more like the movies that you've made, he reshot large chunks of the movie. And so the final cut, Ben Affleck described the final cut of Justice League as a cow with a horse's head. And a lot of people in their reviews of the original movie comment on how you can tell scene to scene that they were shot by different directors and they had different tones and it just didn't work. But then a month before the release, the studio came down and said it has to be cut down to 2 hours. So we know Zack Snyder has confirmed that his original version of Justice League, they filmed about 3.5 hours worth of content. So we can assume that Joss Whedon coming in kind of whittled it down, we'll say it into something that's definitely at least under 3 hours, probably closer to 2.5 hours, because that's around the mark of a lot of big movies. And then a month before the movie is supposed to come out, he's then told, okay, now cut out an additional half hour's worth of content. So if you really think about it, people really throw shade at Joss Whedon for the 2017 Justice League, for how it turned out the way it did. And while he's certainly like responsible for some of it, and we'll get into why, I also see that there's part of it that was outside of his control. Like the studio coming at the last minute and saying, chop out content to make it fit within a 2-hour time frame. That's a really hard thing to see. And as you can tell from watching the Zack Snyder version, there's a lot of story here. And so naturally, yeah, the original version feels very rushed and a lot of stuff doesn't make sense. And there's a ton of plot holes. So Joss, you know what? Like, I do question some of your decisions that you made, but I also understand it wasn't
retroactively cutting you some slack.
Yes, but there are some things that definitely scratch my head at when it comes to you. And the other part about Joss Whedon that's unfortunate is that in the years since the movie came out, Ray Fisher, who played Cyborg in the movie, has come out and like claimed that Joss Whedon had he demonstrated abusive behavior on the set of Justice League, and that it was a bad environment, and that the people at Warner Brothers and DC were kind of like enabling him to behave poorly. You know, this is all hearsay, so I don't know how much of this is true, but apparently at one point he like referred to Diana as Natasha, which suggests that like he was just thinking of them as if the Justice League were just stand-ins for the Avengers. Yeah. And so I really don't want to make any definitive claims about Joss Whedon as a person. There was like an internal investigation that was held at Warner Brothers as a result of Ray Fisher's comments. And I know like now there's more people who have worked with Joss Whedon before that have come out and like made claims of abusive behavior. So the jury's still out in a metaphorical sense of he's actually like, guilty of all these like bad things. But I think as you look at Zack Snyder's Justice League, some of it makes sense. But right off the hop, this is a 4-hour, 2-minute long movie.
I like the way you phrase that. It's 2 hour but 4 minutes. Now I know that's not what you're going for, but it sure is a very long movie.
Now, when we were watching it, I personally didn't feel like I didn't feel like I'd spent 4 hours, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's the thing that struck me is it didn't necessarily feel like I had watched a 2-hour movie, but it did feel like I'd watched a 2-hour miniseries.
And by 2 hour, you mean 4 hour?
4 hour, sorry, yeah, 4-hour movie, but like a 4-hour miniseries, you know? Like something that definitely felt longer than a movie, but not to the extent you'd expect a 4-hour movie to be, I suppose.
Yeah, when we took a break, I would say 60% of the way through for like 10 or 15 minutes. So we did have like a little intermission in there. I've noticed this with a lot of Zack Snyder movies. They are really long. Like Watchmen is like 3 hours long, and like there's an extended version of that's even longer. So I do question its length. While I didn't feel there, I think there are ways you could have cut this up a bit and made it tighter. I mean, Zack Snyder's famous for using slow motion, and
I made that joke, didn't I?
Yeah, you did. And I'm convinced, even if they cut out half of the slow motion in this, we would have saved at least like 10 minutes of screen time.
Yeah, no, I think so too. It was definitely something that was happening a lot. And I mean, all right, like, you know, in all fairness to the movie, there were only a few moments where I thought it was becoming annoying, but at the same time, it's weird because one of those moments was one where the slow motion was actually totally justified. I think you know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
Yeah, which was very strange. Well, I mean, it's not a spoiler. It's the scene, one of the first slow motion scene that Barry Allen has, just feels like it shouldn't be that slow motion. And it almost feels weird to have the Flash going in slow motion because it just holds for so long that I just end up questioning why it was going on that long.
Yeah, I mean, in really briefly, I think Zack Snyder's Justice League is better than the 2017 theatrical release, which some people call the Justice League as a reference to Joss Whedon.
I absolutely agree.
It's better in every way. Like, there's no doubt you put the two side by side, no one will walk away and say, yes, the Justice League 2017 film is a better film. Like, there's no, if anyone will make that case, I would love to have them on the podcast to explain themselves.
Justify their insanity.
Justify, good one. And I think in the years to come, this will actually make a really interesting case study for like film students to compare, like, how do two different directors take all the same footage, or how do you take the same actors and film different versions of the same scenes, and how wildly different do the results get? Because while technically the plot is the same, there's so much more nuance, and scenes have more time to breathe, and character arcs make sense. Like, there's so much more detail that, again, not entirely Joss Whedon's fault. Like, obviously he had to cut stuff out for time, even before the studio came in and told him to cut out even more. But I could kind of see, watching Zack Snyder's Justice League, like Joss Whedon's thought process being like, okay,
what was he trying to do? You understand what was he? Yeah, you understand what he was attempting, but whether or not he fully got there is still kind of up in the air.
Yeah, like there are certain scenes that are in the Joss Whedon version of Justice League that were, things that he reshot. And there's a scene with Lois Lane and Martha Kent in the Joss Whedon version that is a reshot. Like, they reshot the entire scene. In my opinion, the version of that scene that Zack Snyder filmed is better by every stretch of the imagination. So it boggles my mind. It's like, what on earth possessed you, Joss Whedon, to reshoot this scene?
Yeah, that... And although, if it is the scene I'm thinking about, well, no, there's only one. Maybe it was because of the end of the scene and what ultimately happened, and he didn't want that to be in the the although you could have easily just cut
before.
Yeah, you could have just cut out that part of it. You're right. That doesn't really justify it.
I mean, and I just like, the one thing about Joss Whedon's version of Justice League I appreciate is there are a couple key moments with Batman that I think are really good, and those scenes are not in Zack Snyder's version. So there's like one scene with him and Alfred in the Joss Whedon version where he like illustrates very plainly how like Superman is more human than he is, and it kind of like, it's Joss Whedon's attempt at trying to like continue the narrative of this Batman from BVS into Justice League and how he feels like he needs to kind of redeem himself. I liked that scene. I thought it was a good scene. And even the part where Batman gives the Flash a pep talk, that was also a Joss Whedon reshoot. I thought that was a good scene. So seeing that those were filmed by Joss Whedon, not Zack Snyder, I'm like, okay, well, there were certain specific things that Joss Whedon filmed as reshoots that I enjoyed. But when I was watching this version, I didn't feel like I missed them. I'm like, there are other scenes that kind of accomplish those same goals, I guess, in a better way.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to lie, not a big fan of the Alfred, generally speaking, in either version. Just the way he interacted. And, I mean, we talked about this during the movie, the way that, like, he somehow is both Alfred and Lucius, but not.
Oh, I love sassy Alfred.
I can't say that I do, but no, it's more the fact that he is like, he's Alfred, but then he's also can do everything technological as well, and that just seems to be a bit much.
Well, fair enough. I mean, the animated series Alfred could do a lot of stuff, but it's certainly not as if you think of like the Dark Knight trilogy, Alfred and Lucius Fox have different roles in Bruce's life, and they kind of do things differently. But here, yeah, Alfred is kind of like a mixture of both of those. Now, I assumed, and my fear with Zack Snyder's Justice League was that it would be super dark, because there is a very dark tone to Man of Steel, and especially Batman versus Superman. And part of Joss Whedon's efforts was to try and make Justice League less dark and less brooding and less dark. So I'm like, okay, well, if Zack Snyder's getting the keys to his car again, he's going to, release his version, is that everything will be super dark and grim. And it wasn't nearly as dark or grim as I thought it would be.
Yeah, no, that's true. It definitely could have gone much further in the grim dark direction, but it also depends. What do you mean? Do you mean very specifically dark and grim in the?
I mean, visually, yes, it's a lot darker.
Yeah, because it really is, and it is very.
I mean, I'm speaking more like tonally.
Yeah, no, totally. It held back quite a bit, actually. I was also kind of pleasantly surprised by that, but also but it still had a distinct edginess to it, if you will, that still it works, but not completely. And especially, I think that the biggest problem with the dark and it not being lighter is what happened with Jason Momoa in Aquaman not really being seen here, if you know what. Like, Aquaman is a pretty different character in the movie Aquaman and in Justice League, right? I think we can agree that there were changes.
There were some, but I feel like there was enough of a through line. Like, you still get a sense of that he's this guy who has a heart, but he's trying to, like, not care. And he's failing at that. Like, the fact that he does care kind of comes through. He comes off, I would say, much more stoic in this version as opposed to the theatrical cut where he's like, woo! Like, he's more, he comes off as more like a frat boy.
Yeah, but I like I said, I think that's the only real part of the Snyder cut that feels a lot darker is him.
Yeah,
because even Barry Allen is pretty reasonable.
Yeah, and that brings me to things that don't work or still don't work in Zack Snyder's Justice League. We did say it's like better objectively, but things that still don't work for me, like Barry Allen in this, like Ezra Miller's version of the Flash. Like, some of the other characters, they work a lot better in Zack Snyder's Justice League. But for the Flash, a lot of things I didn't like were still here. Like, a lot of the scenes still play out the same. His dialogue is still the same. He's less annoying because some of the reshots with Joss Whedon are out of this, and those are some of the most annoying parts. But I've said it before and I'll say it again. If they were going to have a Flash that's this jokey and silly, they should have made him like Wally West instead of Barry Allen, because at least Barry Allen, as I'm like familiar with him from the TV series, is a radically different character. And in a case like the Flash, where you do have this legacy of different people who have been the Flash, I really didn't see need to make sure that this one was Barry Allen. So like, he still doesn't really do it for me. And even the way he runs looks really silly.
Well, I mean, slow motion is hard to do at the best of time.
Yeah, but
no, I understand what you mean, and he, yeah, it's again a case of like, I see where this was going, but I don't think it quite did what it wanted to.
Yeah, Zack Snyder has a habit of like inserting random songs into his movies during scenes, and to me, like, maybe it's because I didn't recognize the songs that came in, but I'm like, the song doesn't seem to work.
I mean, I think you have to like look at it. The song works in the same way that like any song that he puts into one of his movies work, which means not really, but it gives that Zack Snyder feel, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is 4 hours of content. So people say, oh, like, couldn't they have just broken out in like 2 movies? And my answer is not really, because
no, it wouldn't have worked.
It's sort of funny. Like the movie is split up into 6 parts, and then there's an epilogue that's almost a half hour long.
The epilogue was way too long. I can't believe, and I mean, I understand. Actually, I don't understand why he's like. I know he was like it was his version, but like he had hindsight. He should have cut almost all of that out.
Right. Well, we'll talk about that in the spoiler verse, but
yeah,
I think it's just a weakness of Zack Snyder as a creative that he has a hard time like telling a succinct story. Like the fact that he did need initially 3.5 hours to tell this story, and the fact that you can't really, I'm like, could they have like made a movie that was like establishing like the ancient history and like Cyborg story separately, and then have Justice League after that? But that's like really cutting and pasting like different parts of the film out, and it's truly interesting. Like I would love
to downplaying some of the emotional moments of Cyborg as well if they don't appear where they are.
That's
especially
true
in relationship with like in relation with his father, and that like kind of arc goes somewhere very specific at a very specific time in the movie.
Yeah, so it's really kind of interesting. It is broken into 6 parts. Zack Snyder himself, I watched him in an interview, recommend that you take a break after part 4. So if you are going to sit down and watch this, you got to like take a break somewhere because it'd be a long time to sit in front of a TV. But what's new? You'd be like, well, what's the point of watching Zack Snyder's Justice League as opposed to the original movie? Well, first of all, it's just a better movie. It does have an R rating, which to me, like, I guess there's violence where like, people's heads are cut off and you see more blood and stuff. I didn't even notice it half the time. What I noticed is the F-bombs when people are swearing. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah, but I mean, it's not... It doesn't take you out of it or anything. It still works, and especially in the context of that movie, it's pretty...
The Snyder
solid. Cut
is in a 4.3 aspect ratio, which means if you're watching on like a big TV, it's going to have the black bars on the side. Apparently Zack Snyder's a huge fan of the 4:3 format, and he like wanted to like imagine this being shown on IMAX screens I guess that format works better for IMAX. Truth be told, when we watched, I didn't even notice.
I didn't either.
So I don't think it impacts the movie in a negative way at all. There's a total new, the musical score is totally different. The original version, Danny Elfman does the music, and it's kind of like just the greatest hits of all his previous DC music, which I enjoyed. But I think this score by Junkie XL, or Tom Holkenborg is his real name, is actually a much better score that really fits the tone and the scope of this movie better.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I mean, I don't remember. I honestly do not remember what the score sounded like in the original, so I can't actually necessarily pronounce myself. Is that a thing you say in English? I can't really give an objective opinion because I don't remember what it was like, but the score worked.
Steppenwolf is an actual character in this movie.
Yeah, that's true.
Cyborg actually has something important to do. He's an actual character in the movie. He has like a whole subplot that is very important to the film in this version, which has some spoilery elements, but it is kind of interesting to see this movie with the context of like Ray Fisher claiming Joss Whedon was abusive, because you almost wonder, it's like, was there some kind of like intentional choice by Joss Whedon to like cut out the Cyborg stuff as like some kind of like, because of some issue he had with Ray Fisher? Because it's some of the really best parts of the movie. So it is kind of, I don't know, am I crazy?
No, I mean, I think that there's like, they are some of the better parts of the movie, but at the same time, they're not any more essential to the plot as is, if that makes sense. Like, the movie can still make sense without them.
Yeah, but as Zack Snyder intended for Cyborg to be the heart of the movie. And so like the 2017 version where his role is really scaled back, he feels more like a plot device than an actual character.
Yeah. No, that's true.
Pretty much every character has an actual character arc in this movie. Like, and that's of course a benefit of the longer runtime. Like every character has more to do, and they have a much more clear like beginning and end place in terms of like what their experience of the movie is. Some characters like Lois Lane, their storyline is completely different in the Zack Snyder version. Like, I think pretty much
she didn't have that much of a storyline.
She didn't. No, she had a very small part in the movie, but her little mini arc, if you will, is I think I'm pretty sure like Amy Adams must have reshot every scene she was in, because yeah, we'll talk about spoilers. Her character arc is like it's as if she's playing a different character in the Joss Whedon versus Zack Snyder versions. But that's kind of like my hit list of things that I noticed that were new and different. Is there any, I mean, you said you have a not as clear memory of the original, but was there anything else that isn't spoilery that stood out to you as like, oh yeah, this is new?
I mean, the fact that it was in parts, other than seeming a little Tarantino-esque and therefore kind of pretentious because it doesn't do what Tarantino does when he gives different part to his movie. It just felt like the way things were put together, more so than the original, felt more intentional, and also felt just, but also kind of sadly felt like it was trying to do something more and bigger, which is probably never going to happen. So, but that I guess is a little bit more spoilery. So yeah, no, I think we covered the major differences.
So before we go any farther, I got to give props to Zack Snyder himself, because not only did he come back to a project that I'm sure had some emotional baggage for him. He's actually never seen the 2017 version. His wife saw it and like told him like, don't see this. You'll be too emotionally damaged by it. But he engaged with the fans, and like he was very like, he honored the people who were, and there's even like a shout out in the credits to all the fans that made this possible. And like there were fundraisers being done for mental health as a result of this whole release the Snyder Cut movement. And he's been very charitable and like sharing behind the scenes stuff and like having like hosting events with fans. And despite how aggressive the Snyder Cut fans have come across on the internet, he's been very charitable in giving his time and his energy towards them. And from what I can gather now, he's not really interested in continuing this. He's kind of happy, like this being his final kind of wrapping it up of the DC movies that he's involved with. I know now there's a new hashtag that's like restore the Snyderverse, because now people are like, we've seen this, we want more. So it seems,
that seems like a stretch at this point.
I'm like, guys, like you got your cake, like just like don't get too greedy here. So Zack Snyder's Justice League is available for streaming. It's on HBO Max in the United States. In Canada, it's on Crave, and I think other platforms in the world have it on different streaming services. So certainly worth a watch. We're going to get into some spoilers of like what's new and different in this compared to the original. And we'll skip around to final thoughts, time code, the usual stuff. So inside the spoilerverse now, Silas Stone, Cyborg's dad, he has a much bigger role in this movie than he does in the original. And again, like I can see how Joss Whedon would have been like, okay, like I have to condense all this stuff and make a lot of this more simple. So completely like changing his story, because I remember in the theatrical cut, like you just see him in the end with Cyborg in a lab, implying that they're like working together again. So it is interesting. Like Joss Whedon might have had some issue with Ray Fisher as an actor or as a person, or with Cyborg as a character. And to me, because that subplot is the largest chunk of the movie that's missing, it makes sense that like if they were trying to, cut stuff out and make the movie shorter, then that would be the first thing to go.
I mean, yes, it would make sense. Again, like you said, if that was your purest goal was to just do that, then yes, I think that is the first thing you would cut. But I don't know if it necessarily would be the best thing to cut. I don't know. Like it's it seems like some of the Barry Allen stuff could have been cut instead as well.
Yeah, like the scene with Iris, it's like that to me that didn't actually really add anything to the movie.
Oh, it added nothing, and it dragged on. It was, I mean, I didn't say this in the out of the spoiler verse, but I believe I told you when we were watching it. It just had like I was getting flashbacks of the Hallelujah sex scene from The Watchmen, just because it just seemed to be slow motion for the sake of having slow motion and just going on and on.
Yeah,
it
and
was
it's
a
really
little
late
bit
to the
ridiculous.
party in terms of super speed scenes. Like we've even had Sonic the Hedgehog at this point. Like there's nothing really remarkable anymore about seeing someone move in slow motion at super speed, unfortunately.
Yeah, and even there, like if you compare really that scene to any of the other that have come out, it even barely felt like a proper slow motion.
Yeah. I will say though, like the scenes of the Flash, like using his powers in this movie, it seemed like a unique way of showing his powers. Like there was like a more frantic kind of like, I don't know how to describe, like energized use of his powers. Like the way, like
that's
I was
true.
like, this is even compared to the TV show Flash. I'm like, no, this is actually something creative and it's different and it feels unique. But the slow-mo stuff, I'm like, yeah, we've seen this before. Like, why is this in the movie?
Yeah, and I mean, obviously we're being a little bit critical because but at the same time, it had the opportunity to do it the first time and it didn't, and regardless of all the other things going on behind the scene, it ultimately failed to make any real effect. And I think that's the biggest problem, is that I didn't really feel anything from those scenes. It was just like from the slow motion scene. But even when the Flash started using his powers, like we're in the spoiler verse. The last time he uses it, when he like slows down time in order to reset Steppenwolf actually winning, like he doesn't slow down time. He like reverses time so that Beowulf doesn't actually win. He gives the jolt of energy. Diana gets the decapitation. Like that, really epic. That was really great. But the rest of the time he used his power, like it just almost felt like he was trying to figure out what he's supposed to do.
Which is fair for this version of the character. He's relatively new to all this.
Yeah, but at some level, like, if all he's doing is getting in the way, then why is he there?
I don't know. I appreciated the fact because you have Batman and Wonder Woman, who in this versions are both veterans who know exactly what they're doing. And, with Flash and Cyborg and Aquaman, they're all kind of relatively new and they're still figuring out like how to do their thing. There's that one moment where he gets zapped by the gunner and he's like panicking and he's like, I just got the wind knocked out of me. I'm like, that I actually really felt for him in that moment. I'm like, this feels very real. And like, again, like because he's younger than the others, I actually really felt for him. Like, this is like a tense moment for you. And like, I can imagine how stressful that would be. And I was like, even though I don't like your version of this character, I felt for you in that moment. So you won me over for like, 30 seconds. But yeah, let's talk about the epilogue. So first of all, Martian Manhunter makes like a couple quick appearances in this movie. Apparently, the original version of the scene where he meets Bruce Wayne, that was meant to be Green Lantern, but that was like one of the only things that Warner Brothers wouldn't let Zack Snyder do, is they said, no, like you can't have Green Lantern in this movie. They're developing a Green Lantern television series for HBO Max, so I guess they were just wanting to like not have any confusion there.
Or there's just still a little bit too much of the old Green Lantern movie in the general consciousness.
Well, if they're developing an HBO Max series, then that can't be the case, because like, why would they even attempt that if that was?
Well, no, it's because it's the difference between seeing a character in a TV show and a movie. Like one is like kind of a renewal, and the other one is, kind of is just seeing him there. Like it's very easy to see that it's a new character when you have a new medium. But when it's just the same character in a movie again, I feel like you start being more wary.
I don't know. Anyway, it didn't make sense to me that Warner Bros. Wouldn't let him use it. And I read a thing. Zack Snyder has this opinion that even though he knew he wasn't going to be continuing this, his idea of like a superhero movie like this is that it should never like be like bookended. It's like there's always, the universe always has like other places to go. So in his mind, even though this was his last movie, he said he still felt the need to like kind of like open up the door for like plot threads to like continue elsewhere. He's like, this is what I would have done if I'd made this movie as I did 4 years ago. Like I would have kept the door open for other plots to be continued. So
yeah, and that's admirable, but at the same time,
the fact that they're not going anywhere, does it feel...
Yeah, like, and the fact that it's now apparently has also like baited the the Snyderverse thing. I don't know that if that's the right move.
Yeah, like if I was making
that.
If I was making the average Joe version of Justice League, I would probably cut out everything out of the epilogue that wasn't like the narration with Cyborg's father, because the nightmare scene that's meant to continue that kind of Injustice style universe that's hinted at in BVS and at certain points in this, I enjoyed the scene. Like I enjoyed it. It was really nice to see Jared Leto's Joker and Ben Affleck's Batman actually in a scene together. Because in all the movies that have come out, they've never actually like really been in a scene together. And it was cool to like see like that kind of, I thought it was cool, but it is kind of pointless in that, well, this isn't going to get continued anywhere. And Bruce meeting Marsh Manor, it's like, yeah, that's cool, but it's not going anywhere. So I would have totally like just shaved all that out, just for the sake of making this movie like a shorter experience for people.
But also to have it kind of matter more, be like, yeah, no, this is like, because, again, it's cool that he stuck to his guns in some ways and decided, like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do it as I would have done it, but it's not the movie you would have done, and you know that. And on some level, you have to, like, look at it and say, like, why would you still add that when you know it's going nowhere? And it's going to just be making this movie longer and less cohesive and, everything else. Like, it's kind of...
This ties into the Lois Lane subplot, because literally, like, her arcs are totally different. In the Joss Whedon version, she's still working the Daily Planet. And when she shows up at Superman's resurrection, it's implied that Batman called her because he was trying to act on the vision that he got from Future Flash. In this version, she's like in deep mourning and she's not going to work. And it takes Martian Manhunter meeting with her to convince her to like start going to work again. And it's just by coincidence that she is on site for Superman's resurrection.
Well, coincidence or Martian Manhunter knew something.
True. But you know what I mean? Like that's a totally, like her arc is totally different. Like her waking up in her bed by herself in both versions has a totally different context.
Yeah. Although it's odd though. Her again, like her arc is kind of pointless.
How so?
Well, she doesn't really do anything. Like,
well, she still helps Superman reconnect with his like.
Memories. I mean, but barely. She's there.
Well,
but that's kind of the thing, is like she's just kind of there.
Well, and that speaks to part of the problem of building this shared universe off the back of Man of Steel, because Man of Steel, as I've learned recently, the original idea of that movie was, what if Superman existed in the real world?
Well, that's why we have The Boys.
But the original idea for that movie did not include it being set in the DC universe where there's all these other things that are also occurring. So that the problem of that through line carrying through into BVS, where Superman is a controversial figure, the scene with like Lois's role in this movie is to try and help us remind the audience that apparently Superman is a figure that was like revered when he died, and that it's meant to show us like beyond the Justice League saying we need a strong, powerful person.
But I feel like the fact that like Barry Allen remembers who he is, who wasn't, directly part of the Justice League, and like there's a lot of you know, there's more than enough there to set it up that, and you know, just keep all those establishing shots of like the Superman symbol on London Bridge and everything else. Like,
so you're saying,
you know,
in the beef pork ribs version of Justice League, you'd cut out Lois altogether?
Yeah, actually, I would, because you're not setting up for the rest of it, and you know, if you want to absolutely leave something, you can leave Darkseid saying, "We're gonna do this the old-fashioned way and come back with the Armada," but like, you don't need that. You like, or if you don't cut her out completely, make it so that she was Martian Manhunter when she brought him back.
Interesting. I did notice like it was like a pregnancy test in her like bedside table. I was like, oh boy, are they like trying to like, you know, tease us with some kind of...
Well, that's still a teasing for Injustice, right?
That's true. Oh gosh, yeah, that's true.
That's literally what starts it off.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, so and this is where my mind goes back to Joss Whedon. I'm like, what were you thinking? Because, you know, we all know about the Henry Cavill mustache thing, and so it's you know, before we saw Zack Snyder's Justice League, it was actually kind of hard to tell. Well, sometimes it was really obvious, but we weren't really clear on like what is a reshoot and what isn't. Except if it was a scene involving Superman, because the CGI they did on removing his mustache was terrible. And you realize that pretty much every scene Superman's in was reshot. And I'm like, why on earth did you bring Henry Cavill back, make all those animators do that work, put that cruddy version of those scenes out, just for the sake of like having your version of the scene, which is objectively a worse version than the original version?
Yeah, I don't know. And especially because Henry Cavill, scenes, I feel like again, if you're really splitting hairs, that movie could have still been possible without Superman. Like,
yeah, and again, that
because and that's another thing, like, because I remember, because Mjolnir had to leave slightly before the end of the movie, right? And she asked me, you know, does the ending change, or does Superman just come in at the end to save the day? And it's like, yeah, no, that is kind of what he did. Like, all he does is just come in, save the day, and then leave again. Like,
well, I mean, I feel like it seems like he's more collaborative. Like, it's not like he's just defeating the enemy by himself. They're
no, but he still doesn't necessarily need, like, he doesn't add a specific skill to the fight, and especially with Barry Allen's kind of sonic boom, his presence is not necessary for the climax to happen.
Yeah, I guess this is especially clear in the Zack Snyder version. It's like he's really held up as like a symbol, and it's like he's almost like none of those heroes feel confident enough in themselves. It's like, yeah, like we can do this on our own. They're all convinced that they need him, not even necessarily because of how strong he is, but because of like, again, this idea of like what he represents and how he's like seen as this hero. So if anything, he's like a good luck charm.
Yeah, and he doesn't he doesn't actually do that much in the present. And yeah, it just, again, I understand you need to have Superman in a Justice League movie, and there's a lot of reasons why he is there, and he does add certain things to the story, but also he doesn't really need to be there. He doesn't, I feel like, and that's the thing, like, Lois Lane in this movie doesn't really pass the Chekhov gun test. Like,
no, I think it's called the... Yeah, I know what you mean.
No. Chekhov's gun is if something is in the movie, it needs to be useful.
Oh, I thought the Chekhov's gun was like something is introduced early on and then it comes back later on in the movie.
Yes. Well, yeah, basically. And I don't know. I don't think she fully reaches that.
Yeah, I mean, that might be another interesting way to condense the movie down, because there is a large section of the movie dedicated to like bringing Superman back from the dead. So that would certainly be. But then also the
Just
Zack
don't
Snyder.
do that.
Yeah, but then also the Zack Snyder version, it really illustrates how Superman's death was important to the plot, because it illustrates like how the mother boxes kind of like acknowledged that was the time to like call for help because he wasn't around anymore. So cutting him out of the movie you'd need to do more significant changes to things.
I mean, significant is an interesting word. You'd have to find a different MacGuffin to make the boxes wake up.
I guess, yeah.
Like, it was like, I understand what you mean, but again, that was one line, kind of a throwaway that establishes that.
Yeah, and speaking of Superman, like one of the scenes that stood out, or a couple of there's in the Joss Whedon Justice League, perhaps because he likes to have characters like arguing with each other, there is a lot of actual debate about whether they should bring Superman back or not, and it like leads to like a conflict between Batman and Wonder Woman where they kind of like,
yeah.
But in this version, initially anyway, like they're all kind of in agreements, like, yeah, like if we have the
only
option.
one who seems like a little bit against it possibly is Aquaman.
Yeah,
I feel like that was a wasted opportunity from this version to not look into that a bit more.
I just thought it was an interesting, like, different direction to, again, it's more or less the same movie, but there are nuances. And even though like the Justice League spend more time in scenes together, like you don't necessarily like get as much kind of like talking to each other. And I think that's, people have talked about Zack Snyder being like a visual filmmaker, whereas Joss Whedon's more like a character writing dialogue director. So you get more of them doing things together, but not as much of them like verbally like speaking with each other.
Yeah, that's true. And I guess you can chalk it up to like a difference, but even there like nothing came out of that semi-conflict at all, and that still seemed like a little bit of waste.
And that's, I think, just a flaw with this movie, like regardless of what version you're looking at.
Oh yeah,
like them rushing the death of Superman story in BVS, like that was a mistake, and this movie had to try to address that. So
I think you kind of, you know, hit it on the head when you kind of like said, you know, that basically Zack Snyder needs to learn how to write movies instead of well, you didn't say that, but I'll say it. He needs to learn how to write movies instead of miniseries. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
because
unless he transitions to just creating content for streaming services.
Well, yeah, but that's the thing, like, because yeah, people do have that problem with like The Watchmen, and I agree. Like, there was not a whole lot in The Watchmen that like could be cut, and like that one is a little bit different because he was working from source material, but still, like, just write a movie that you can actually finish. And because I was talking to Mjolnir when we were watching it, and she was like, you know, one of the things that people say is like, yeah, this is a lot better because it's using all, you know, the 4 hours of footage that he had just about. But at what point do you say, why was there a need for him to use this footage to make a coherent movie? Why wasn't he able to create a coherent movie that didn't need to be 4 hours long, and then we could have gotten that?
Yeah, and that's Zack Snyder going forward. You know, hopefully you're listening to us right now and you're taking.
Oh yes, notes. we're gonna sway Zack Snyder's way of doing things, clearly.
Yeah. So with Steppenwolf, you don't sound as convinced as I do that he's a better, that this is a better version of the character.
I mean, no, it's all right. It's a better version of Steppenwolf. Is it a good character? Is it a real character? I'm still not convinced about that.
I don't know. There's something tragic about him. It's like you can tell that, like,
yeah,
he's fallen from grace, and that he's like, well, like, will this be the thing that will kind of bring me back to my former status? And that is like that desperation.
Yeah, like he definitely has better motivation, and you do kind of look into it, but I don't know if it does as much as people say it, like, as you seem to, like, because I remember, like, Mjolnir was pointing out that he's talking to, like, this CGI apparition of, I forgot his name, the Darkseid's Desaad, and that's better than him just maniacally talking to the box. But there was, like, and I think I might have mentioned it to you when we were watching, it's like, but at some point he was, like, just repeating the same things.
Yeah, like some of those scenes could have been cut out. It's like we don't need to see him like
he's just giving a he's giving like a status update to Desaad, and that's like, okay, cool, but like his status update is exactly the same. The parademons are sniffing out the box. I have interrogated 1 or 2 people. Like, he said exactly the same status report. And it's like, okay, but we know this. You move on to something else. If you're gonna put him on scene, like, give him more screen time, at least do something with the screen time.
Yeah. And like I say, he filmed 6 minutes of new footage. I think that's like actual footage with actual actors, but there's also all these additional scenes where it's all CG characters in a CG environment with Darkseid and with Desaad and with Steppenwolf. So I think Darkseid's a great character, and I'm glad they found a way to include him in the movie, but he's kind of like not really in the movie because he never really like interacts with any of the characters aside from Steppenwolf. So I'm like, is it actually helpful?
Even there, it's Desaad up until the last message after he's found the anti-life equation, and then Darkseid deigns to see him for half a second to confirm, and then leaves again.
And then he shows up in a Zoom call at the end.
Yeah. In which he's just like, I don't know, was the portal open or not? Like, I feel like the portal was big enough and open long enough for, like, a few people, even if, like, even just Darkseid, jump out there, beat them up, win. Like, it feels like if Darkseid really is a threat, he could have just jumped through that portal, maybe take Desaad and the other person whose name isn't said, and I'm sure you know who it is. You know, the 3 of them.
Granny Goodness.
Okay, the 3 of them with Steppenwolf against the Justice League in the form they are right now, they'd probably win. So why didn't they just do that?
In universe, and this happens a lot in DC stories, that like because of the Green Lantern Corps' existence, there's Darkseid is actually like forbidden from like going to certain places of his, like he asked. So a lot of, and Earth is usually one of those places. So often there's like a secret invasion kind of infiltration of Earth that like Darkseid can't just go there and do it himself because the Green Lanterns will come after him.
All right, but in this universe,
it's not
he literally says
here.
We're going to. Yeah, but he also ends by saying we're going to do this the old-fashioned way, call the Armada.
Well,
so
because
clearly
he's learned about the anti-life equation at that point.
I suppose that does change things.
But certainly, again, if we were trying to like think of ways to cut this down, then have him be in the flashback scene, and maybe have him like be in the Zoom call at the end to establish him as a threat for future movies. But
it was also weird that like. Because when he, in the flashback scene, when he slams his hammer on the ground, you see the anti-life equation. Did he just forget where it was? Like, did he forget that Earth was the planet where he found it originally?
Yeah, that was one thing I was confused by. It's like, how do you it's like, if it's the one time you were defeated, how did you forget what planet it was?
Yeah, like,
I guess because really they travel with boom tubes, like they didn't, maybe they lost the...
Yes, but, like... But at the same time, I'm pretty sure there's like at some point, Steppenwolf gives kind of lip service to like saying the Atlanteans are not united. There's no Kryptonian. There's no hell. Like he's kind of listing off the things that were going in their favor for the invasion, and I think he might have mentioned the Atlanteans, and that just seems weird. Like, now does he not remember the Atlanteans were part of the people who defeated him?
Yeah. Anyway, I guess that's also just another thing. It's like, regardless of what version it is, like this isn't a perfect movie. And that's kind of what I've heard from a lot of people. It's like, yeah, it's a better movie than the original. But it's still not a great movie or the best superhero movie ever made.
Oh yeah. Like, I don't think that movie is a, like, again, with the whole like, Snyderverse thing. This movie has not convinced me that Zack Snyder should be in charge of a DC universe. it has at most convinced me that he wanted to do one, but
yeah, and I think in the current DC strategy of like Elseworlds, multiverse stories, like they've confirmed this is non-canon to the DCE, like the current whatever. It's just what he would have done if they had continued his direction. So coming around to final thoughts, Zack Snyder's Justice League is a much better movie than what we got in 2017. And it is baffling to me that Joss Whedon chose to reshoot as much of the film as he did, because there is not a single scene that he filmed that has a lesser version in Zack Snyder's Justice League. And like most extended edition or director's cuts of movies, the extra runtime allows for more character development and things are more explained. So if things that didn't necessarily add up originally make more sense, the action scenes are longer and a lot of them actually like look a lot better.
But that also has to do with the CGI having more time close to release to actually work.
Yes, so I'm happy Zack Snyder got to do this. I've never been like the hugest fan of his movies or his interpretation of DC characters, but I enjoyed myself. I'm not on the hashtag restore the Snyderverse bandwagon, but I am happy that HBO Max and Warner Brothers went ahead and allowed him the opportunity to do this. So, I gave 2017 Justice League 3.5 out of 4 bad cookies initially. With hindsight, I'd probably drop that down to about a 2.8 out of 4 bad cookies, and even that's probably still generous. Zack Snyder's Justice League, I would probably put a solid like 3.2 out of 4 bad cookies.
I still think this movie is a bad precedent, and I'm afraid people are going to look at it as being better, as being a good enough justification for its existence. I really don't think, yes, obviously it is better, but I would have rated the original Justice League quite a bit lower than you. So I'm giving this one a 2.8. I still it's not a good movie. It's not a great movie. It's a decent miniseries, but even there, a miniseries would have done a better job of establishing plot points in a better order that makes more sense. So, yeah, I don't think there's enough there to justify its existence. But good on the people who did it. Good things have come out of it. So, but as a movie, I still 2.7. I think, 2.8. 2.8 is as high as I would rate it.
I did talk to my one friend who is very much in the Snyder Cut movement, and he was beyond thrilled with the final result. And it sounds like it was exactly what he was hoping for. And generally what I'm seeing is that, yes, those who wanted this, the diehard fans, have gotten what they wanted. And ultimately, that's all that matters to me. Yeah, is that the fans are feel like that they've been rewarded, and that Zack Snyder's been able to tell his story. This is just kind of scare me. Warner Brothers has this really terrible history of messing with DC movies, going all the way back to the original Superman movie. So I really hope that they've learned their lesson to let directors tell their stories and to not do any more of this last minute interruptions and trying to change focus partway through production. Just stop it. I'm tired of this kind of thing happening.
I doubt it.
Yeah. So Zack Snyder's Justice League is available for streaming depending on where you live in the world. It is 4 hours long, and it's broken up into 6 parts plus an epilogue. So give yourself, I would say you could probably really watch one part a day if you really wanted to spread it out, or do an intermission after part 4 if you want to try it all in one sitting. It's worth the watch. And at the very least, if you're a movie fan, then watching it just for the sake of comparing it to the 2017 version is worth the time as well.
But, it's 4 hours of your life you will not get back.
If you want to reach the show, you can send us an email at
batjarpodcast@gmail.com.
Or you can tweet us at
The Bat Cookie Jar.
You can find the Bat Jar Podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, including YouTube, because we got a channel. Share our posts on Facebook, write reviews, give our shows a rating. This will help all people join us inside the Bat Jar, and we appreciate it dearly.
So it's time to go inside the Bat Jar and find out what we're going to talk about next week. What? Oh, I dropped a water bottle, but luckily there was nothing in it, so...
And it wasn't soap.
Was that a reference to something?
Don't drop the soap.
Oh, okay, got it.
Not really, but yes.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Defining the word fan.
Oh.
And I don't think this is in relation to like the thing that blows air.
Are you going to still steal my joke before I make it? Come on, don't do me dirty.
Well, it just means that we're on the same page because we are synced into the unity.
I like it.
So preamble, before we even have the episode next week, I think this topic originated from our nerd versus geek conversation, and I was really trying to make a case that people who are super invested in sports should be considered like sports nerds or sports geeks. And there was this idea that, like, well, a fan, you can call someone a sports fan, but not a sports geek. And so I think
you can call somebody a sports geek, but we'll get that next week.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of a teaser for it's going to be really microscopic and analytical and trying to get back into our realm of trying to provide objective definitions for words that are seen different ways. So come back to the Bat Jar podcast next week where we try to define the word fan and essentially fandom as a result of that. Until then, I'm Average Joe.
And I'm Beef Pork Ribs.
Catch you on the flip side.
You're not a real fan unless you've got rotating palms.